Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, good morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. There was a problem. They said there was a problem with my audio, so I want to make sure it was fixed.
Well, and I think I didn't have mine audio plugged in, so that's probably on me.
Okay, well, now we can talk.
Okay.
First
Good
one.
morning.
What? Go ahead. Good morning. We'll wait a few minutes for some other people. I think you're the first one to call in.
Oh, okay. Well, I was excited about it.
I'm so glad. You've been on some of the other calls too, right?
I have been, and I've really enjoyed them.
Oh,
I
good.
appreciate your efforts and Greta's to put this all together.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. And we're going to continue it for next year. So that's
Oh, good.
one of the decisions. So that's good. Let's see. Can you see me? I think I'm having trouble.
I can see you. I don't. I guess there.
Yeah. Hey, I can see you. Hi. It's so nice to put a face. And it's Marjorie. Is that your name? I can't
No,
remember.
it's Mary Lane.
Mary Lane. I knew it was an M.
Yeah.
And remind me, Mary Lane, where do you work again?
I work at Options for Southern Oregon down in Grants Pass.
Okay, so you work with there's another right? Hi, Greta.
Hi.
Hi. So there's
Mary Lane.
Mary Lane. I just can't. I'm going to write that down because I keep wanting to do something different with your last part of your Mary name.
Yeah.
So we'll wait a few minutes for others.
I think I better mute my phone.
Okay. And Greta, I'm videotaping this one. I started the videotape.
Excellent.
No, I can't.
Because I think I would have forgot about it too.
I'm just going to double check here and make sure I did, but I'm pretty sure because it says now stop video.
No, it says on my screen that you're recording.
Good. Okay. I started before the call because I thought I will forget. Sure as anything. And I don't see myself, but Greta, do you see me as well?
Yes, I see you in Maryland.
Okay, great. So I'm just got something going on here. Who knows what?
So where are you, Greta?
I'm in Salem.
Oh, where's your picture?
I don't have a webcam on my computer.
Oh,
I'm sad about that.
Oh yeah.
No,
yeah.
not really.
I was going to say I'll send you mine.
I will tell you though that your guys' offices and background look much better than if I had a picture because it's just nice that you're in an office with pictures on the wall and prettiness.
Yes. Well, just be glad you can't see my desk.
Hey, what about the rest of the office? You get all the mess you can't see. No, hopefully pretty soon we'll get somebody else. What time is it? It's just barely. Should we start without others, or should we wait a minute?
Maybe we should just give it like 3 more minutes.
Okay. That sounds good. With the Thanksgiving holiday, I got this announcement to you late, Greta, and I'm sorry about that. I hope that's not going to affect our attendance, and it certainly might. Just the Thanksgiving holiday alone, like you had mentioned, maybe.
Yeah, it's a difficult week because it might affect our attendance and that people are busy catching up with their clients. But I always hope that people put these on their calendars in advance, and it's not my reminders with the login that moves them towards putting them on the calendar.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good point. And if not, we'll just have a really nice chat with Mary Lane and
Yeah.
kind of do some planning for next year, and we'll be good.
Well, I could show you ladies some of my gambling artifacts.
That'd be great. Let's go for it. Well, now it says there's 6 participants. So is everybody able to hear us? Randy and Raul, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, good. We've been sort of waiting for people to call, and I didn't realize some people called in already. And Julio, you've called in.
I have, yeah, and now I can hear you, and I think, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. And
great.
Somebody else, I can't remember the name for RICAO.
That's Rika.
Rika, okay, Rika. All right, so let's see the artifacts, and then we'll get going.
Okay.
Can everybody see Mary Lane?
Well, now this isn't Mary Lane right there.
No.
Just to clarify.
Oh my goodness, look at that. Thank you.
And see, her little purse comes off.
Oh God, gets out of money.
Okay, enough of that.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Right now, no one's on mute because there's only 6 of us, so I think we'll try it without muting, and hopefully the background noise won't overcome it. So as we remember that these phone calls are much less organized and structured with specific topics, I did make just a few slides to kind of keep us all on the same page. And this is the last call of 2017. So I just wanted to kind of look back a little bit, look forward a little bit, and then we'll go from there. So the topics we've reviewed, just as a reminder for everybody, in 2017, I don't know that everybody was there for everything, but we started with common barriers to engaging families. Might have to mute. It sounds like we're getting some background noise. I'm going to have to mute that. I think by now I would really learn how to.
Yeah. Come back and right out to the left, and then just come on back and come on the road. Yeah. Now what?
Okay, so we're having a lot of background noise. Do you know how to mute yourselves if you have a lot of background noise?
So you can just send them on back, or I'll take you.
We're going to need to do something. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, you can unmute yourselves now, but I've muted that background noise. So the top topics we've reviewed are common barriers to engaging families, and just sort of some general overview of family and gambling. We did that in January, and then or February, I can't remember. And then later on, we looked at family psychoeducation, the idea of externalizing and mapping gambling, looking at patterns of interaction and family structure that are affected by and help maintain problem gambling. Then the third one in the summer, we looked at socioculturally attuned therapy, particularly around diversity, social context, and power. And then last time for our forum this last month, in October, it was high conflict couples and debt disclosure. So those have been the 4 major forums for the year. And then in our advanced calls, I think the main input we've heard is that these are helpful for looking at how families are incorporated in treatment across agencies, looking at and consulting with particular treatment issues, not particular families, but treatment issues involving families, and then sharing ideas about how to work with families among the call participants. And most people have reported that's been pretty helpful, and we're going to be doing that today. So just, we've covered a lot of topics this year. And my sense is that some people have been pretty much following along. Some people had this training before, and some people it's relatively new. But just for those who maybe weren't here the whole time, we've talked about reporting requirements that are unique or specific to family work. For example, you're more likely to run into learning about elder abuse, vulnerable adult abuse, or neglect, and child neglect, particularly around economic abuse. And so just reporting requirements around those. We've talked quite a bit about structure and family structure as a metaphor for how to think about families and their organization. We've talked about power dynamics and relationships, externalizing gambling as a problem and how to kind of map that and look at how the effects of gambling on families. We've talked about reducing the impact of gambling on family members. Last time we talked a lot about the disclosure of gambling secrets and how to help families with those kinds of secrets. We've talked about delivering psychoeducation to family members, both formally through group psychoeducation classes, so to speak, as well as integrating education throughout the process of counseling. We've considered the impact of family dynamics and power on money barriers. And throughout, we've been challenging the sort of pathologizing of family members when we call them codependent or enablers. And then, like I said a minute ago, really trying to integrate something that's not really integrated that often into problem gambling treatment, which is this sort of societal, sociocultural perspective around people's social location and gambling treatment. So today's call, I was hoping we get some specific issues from call participants like we have been, and general consultation, and then that we could review some plans and seek some input. I did prepare one possible topic if no one has topics. If they do, I'd rather go with the topics from call participants. But if we don't have any topics, just because I don't want to sit in silence, that's my worst fear. Well, it's not my worst fear, but it's a fear. I thought somebody else talked last time about talking about harm reduction versus abstinence. So that's a backup topic. So I'm going to go ahead and open the call to everybody, to all the participants, and see what you would like to talk about. All right, let's go. Anybody have an issue they're dealing with, or something that they'd would like to talk about today?
I think the idea around doing harm reduction sounds really good as far as like the two different ways that you can work, whether it's going to be based on abstinence or harm reduction, and kind of what that looks like and how you work with the family around those two goals.
I like that topic. You probably brought it up last time. I still remember. Anybody else have an issue that they'd like to talk about, or a general consultation that they'd like?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I like the harm reduction idea as well.
Okay. Any other input from anyone? Okay. So
I'm debating on throwing something out, but maybe I'll consider doing it after harm reduction.
okay, can you just kind of mention what it is so we know kind of how much time to leave and so on?
I guess I'm just thinking about working with couple systems where one of them has a really heightened critical voice, and to the point of where anytime the therapy seems to turn towards them, the narrative becomes, it's all about me. Why is this all about me? It's not about the person gambling, or it's not about, like, so where a critical voice becomes so deafening and large in their body that it makes it hard for them to participate in the work.
Okay. So, anybody else have something they want to talk about? All right, I would suggest that since we're prioritizing sort of consultation, let's go ahead and take this issue that you just brought up. And then I know we'll have time, I'm pretty sure we will. Then we'll go on into the one that I sort of prepared. if that's okay with everybody. So I'm going to leave everybody unmuted, and hopefully we can handle the sound. As soon as I said that, we got the dog. Okay. That's okay. We can live through all that. All right. So now I've got to get this thing off my screen. Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's talk about this. Can you talk a little bit more about when you're saying critical voice, what you mean, what the pattern of interaction looks like, what the situation is? And again, we're not working with this particular couple, but we're talking about. So can you tell a little more about it?
Yeah, there's, I've actually seen multiple systems like this. And
can you identify who you are?
yeah, this is Lisa Carlson with Emergence.
I thought that was you, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm a little sick today, though, so I sound a little, every time I call in on these, I'm somehow sick, so. Yeah, so I'm actually thinking of a few different systems, but the thing that I'm seeing is in working with a couple system, I'm seeing moments where I'll spend time on one person, you know, like different things will come up and you'll see like, okay, this person's work, here's their barrier. So I'll spend time with them, bring it back to the couple. And I can even spend a bit of time with, we'll say, person A, kind of helping them through whatever their barriers, old stuff is. And then when it switches to person B, you know, when it becomes their time for their stuff to come forward, that there starts to be a narrative around, you know, why is it always focused on me? Which it's not. It's very much not at all. Or I'm being told that everything I'm doing is wrong, which is not at all what's happening at all. Like that's, and it's with these people where I'm noticing they have a really strong critical voice, like, and this is part of the discussion as well, but where they'll even acknowledge, you know, and maybe slowly with some of them over time, it might even take a while for them to get ready to get to the point of saying, yeah, maybe I do have a critical voice, but you can hear it in how they talk about themselves. You know, you talk compassionately about how important it is to hold more accountability around holding cards, how, you know, it's important they take a more active role in like getting the cards back, doing a lot of the financial stuff, and they don't do it. And there's a narrative there too around, well, I don't want to do those things because I don't want to take away my spouse's autonomy, while the gambling spouse is going, please do that. Please take it away. And, but then when you go to kind of work and talk about why it's so important to hold more accountability, the narrative becomes, why is this about me? They're the one gambling. And then they call themselves things like stupid, or, you know, you can hear the internal criticalness. And so I guess, and sometimes it's so strong that it's a huge barrier. And so I guess what my thought is, you know, have people experience that before, where, and I'm not just talking like a little critical voice or like, oh, I'm talking about like some real serious discomfort with getting to the point where the work is on them, and what are strategies that people are using to move through that and keep the people engaged.
Okay, so that's a question for the group. So any questions you want to follow through and ask Lisa, or comments that you want to start with? Anybody?
Can I just mention a little bit about the sound? So Teresa, I can barely hear you, but I hear everybody else really loudly.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just lean in. Okay, we're getting a lot of background noise again. This is makes these calls difficult. So everybody heard Lisa's what Lisa's talking about. Does anybody resonate with that? Is that similar to what anyone has experienced? Anybody? Okay, well, hopefully everybody can hear. So let's you and I just start talking, Lisa, and hopefully people will jump in. So I wondered about these situations when you're talking about it's the person who's not gambling or not gambling problematically who is most likely in these situations to sort of resist looking at themselves. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, there is so much background noise, I can't actually hear you.
All right, we're going to have
I
to.
I don't know if people can mute themselves or it's.
Okay, I'm going to go about muting people now. We're gonna.
Yeah, it sounds like someone's out on the road.
Everybody, and then I'm going to unmute. Oh, for Pete's sakes. Hold on. I'm working on this now. Can't mute me. Okay, now. Lisa, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Lisa? Huh. All right, still working on this. Okay, now I've muted everyone. Lisa, can you unmute yourself? Man, this is ridiculous. I don't seem to be able to just unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Let me mute everybody else again and we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm sorry, Lisa, I still can't hear you. I don't know why you're not unmuted. Okay. All right, now I think I did it. Lisa, you're unmuted now, correct?
Hold on. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can, but now we've just had one more person come in and I'm, okay, is that good enough? Can you hear? Oh, crumb. All right, now Lisa, you're completely gone off the meeting. This is not good. Right.
Okay, no, I am here. I shut down my laptop because I think it might have been making a terrible echoing noise.
Okay, so what I'll do now is I'm going to try to mute everybody again. I just don't see your name here anymore.
I shut my computer. I'm not sure why my number isn't there, but I can just try like this. I don't want to.
Okay, now You can't hear me, so we'll have to try it like this. I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, I'm hearing from lots of people that they can't hear. So could everybody just really try not to type and not to get into a lot of background noise? Because when you're typing, we're hearing every single click and all the background noise is coming through really loudly. So if we're going to be unmuted, I'm sorry this time, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be working to unmute some and not others. So
Teresa, this is Greta.
Hi, Greta.
I think that Lisa is now on one of the phone numbers, listed as one of the phone numbers. So maybe if we can determine what phone number she is, because she said she's not online, that maybe we can leave her unmuted and she'll come through.
Thank you. Lisa, what's your phone number?
It's 321-217-7104.
All right, now I'm going to work. That's a good idea, Greta. We'll try that. All right, now, Lisa, you should be able to hear.
I can hear great.
Okay, so let's speak close to our computers and loudly so everybody can hear. And let's try to remember what we were talking about.
Okay.
Everybody, the technology can be difficult with so many different systems and different settings. So I wanted to know, Lisa, a little bit more about, you said the person who's being highly critical is the person who's not problem gambling. Is that correct?
Well, I can think of two different systems where in one of them, actually both are problem gamblers.
Okay.
And it's more doing relationship work to help decrease underlying triggers. But the one I've been thinking of as I've been speaking is where the support person is the one with the intense critical voice.
Okay. And what's the power dynamic like in the relationship?
Let's see. You know what? I think I'm trying to debate if I want to switch gears, because I think just last night we might have moved past something. But you know what? No, even this is one where I may encounter this again, and I wouldn't mind getting past it quicker. So it's the power dynamic is the problem gambler has a good paying job, works very hard, gives quite a lot to their work. We'll say the type of perfectionist. The support person has not completed college. They're in their late 40s, but they haven't completed college, in part because they just have these struggles where they seem to just get really upset at the world and then have these blow-ups. And so part of the dynamic is they seek out jobs, and because they don't have like a certain level of education, there's only a certain type of jobs available. But almost at every job they go to, somewhere down the road, 6-9 months down the road, they get so upset with everyone they work with that they quit. And so,
so let me just interrupt you for a second. So that might be to this particular person, the issue around the job and so on. But in general,
right.
What I'm wondering about is when you look at gender, class, race, abilities, all those things, and you look at who influences whom more, who's more attuned to the other one, is the complaint.
They're both pretty in tune. See, and that's where this one's kind of complicated, because while the one makes the money, she's not actually that concerned about being the one making the money.
Right.
It's kind of balanced, but in a weird way where the one of them is making all of the money, and then the other one is going to classes and then dropping out of them, going to, and so, but there isn't, and that in itself is the power differential, that the person making the money isn't so concerned about the money,
Right.
but they're concerned about that things feel imbalanced in terms of, they're not even looking for the person to make money. So it's kind of, I know, I understand what you're asking, and in some ways it's very balanced, but it's this complicated structure that makes it difficult.
Ask a couple more questions about the power nuances. So
Yeah.
what I'm thinking and see if this is in any way fits at all. Now, are these two female partners? Is this a female and male partner?
It's a female-male partner. The gambler is a female, and the spouse is male.
And the male is
The
the one
support
that's more,
person.
is that right?
The male is what?
Is the one that's more critical or the female?
The male is more critical. The male is the support person and is also the one that has a very strong internal critical voice.
Okay, all right.
Internal critical towards spouse, overly compassionate to the point of where it's enabling.
Okay, so compassion to the spouse, but critical of himself.
Correct.
Okay, and so when you're looking at things like their ability to work together and their ability to come together to fight against the gambling, what exactly happens or doesn't happen in their interaction relative to that?
The gambler, the female partner, is clear. I need more accountability. I need you to take the credit cards. I need you to ask them, get them back from me. Mm-hmm. I need you to be in charge of, like, not let me into the account. I need you to be sitting down with the finances. I need you to not leave me alone to be managing all of the finances.
Okay. And then,
mm-hmm.
and then you're saying that the partner, or what you're calling the support person, is saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want you to lose autonomy and focus more on internal criticism. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's almost not even that direct. It's like they're kind of like, okay, and they do some joking, and then later when stuff happens, they go, well, I just felt so bad. So it is. Yeah, then I don't want to take it away. Well, I was just so proud of her. Like, there was a spending spree where she came back and she said, I did a bad thing. And he said, what did you do? And she said, I bought stuff. Well, the buying stuff, and he knows this, is very tied in also with her gambling. It's like, I can't get to this, so I'll buy stuff. Mm-hmm. And he never asked her how much she spent, what it was. He was just so proud of her that she came back with stuff. Down the road, he finds out that she had actually spent $2,500 on stuff. Mm-hmm. And was just still so proud of her that she got stuff, but then also got critical with himself for not asking. And then, so it's that kind of thing.
Okay. So, I mean, it would be interesting to really look a little more closely at the whole thing. So I'm just going to throw out some possibilities and then we'll open it up to people. But one of the things I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about how just as a possibility, I'm not saying this is the way it is, but if you look at how sometimes power works in a relationship, when one person says, I want you to hold me accountable. In other words, I want you to stand up to me. And that is a really difficult message, because sometimes that leaves the other person in a position where if I stand up to you, I've just done what you've told me to do. And if I don't stand up to you, then I've stood up to you, in fact. So it becomes kind of a paradox. And so I think I'm curious about, like, if that kind of paradox is happening and the therapist also wants the supportive other to stand up, then it sort of makes sense to me that there might be some wavering there, because the message is a real sort of there's two things about it that I wonder about. And I'm not saying, I mean, sure, it's probably not this because it's more complex, but one is this idea that I want you to stand up to me. And the other one is this idea that if you don't stand up to me, then somehow you're the problem because you're enabling. And the accountability gets placed on the partner. And the partner then gets mad at himself for not holding the first partner accountable. So I'm just wondering if it becomes a little bit of a paradox in how it plays out, how the messages play out.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about with this particular couple, and maybe it is there, but that it doesn't rise to the surface for me right away. Mm-hmm. They're really. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and I would have to chew on that one more, because some of these are situations, like I hear this stand up to me, where this is. It's so much softer even in how they talk about it, and it's like it's things where, yeah, the male partner is being asked to take accountability, but like he's really not, he hasn't been stepping up to the plate. It's not even like, hey, give me that back, or hey, whatever. It's like he won't even sit down and do the finances with her. He like, and there's so many messages that like that he's bad at math, that
all kinds of reasons.
I don't know. I'm trying to. I would have to keep chewing on that one, but it. There are moments where it's not even like stand up. It's can you just, you know, like an instance is she begged him to go to go with her to exclude her from one of the casinos. It's the last casino that she goes to, and I, you know, and let him know, I really need your support. I need a little bit more encouragement to go do this. Like, just can you help put some of the energy behind it? And there was no, and he talks very much about wanting to support her, but when it comes to the things that she's actually saying, this is what I need,
okay,
that he won't go do it.
And are they in the counseling or the therapy process, are they talking directly to each other about those kinds of issues around who meets whose needs and why, and what it means when you know, how they ask for needs to be met, and what it means when one person is not attuned to the other one's needs? Are they doing that direct conversation with each other?
Yeah, I mean, it might not be framed with those specific questions, but yeah, they're you know, they are talking about that. Yeah.
So you're doing enactments with them?
I mean, I wouldn't say enactments, no, but there's definitely. I mean, these are the I mean, that we do absolutely unpack, and you know, what is it like when you won't do this, and so they're yeah.
The only thing I would think, and just I don't have an answer for this because it sounds like there's something else going on that I'm not being able to see just from hearing about it. But I would think that you might want to, a person might want to step back and have them talk to each other about these things directly, and get out of the role of being the one who unpacks and talks to one and then the other, because there's some dynamic between them that at least I'm not picking up on. And I think having them do more talking directly to each other will help you understand the pattern of interaction between them, and then interrupt it and get the different pattern to happen. So I think if you're asking him, asking her asking him, you know, and that kind of thing, and then she's frustrated with him and you're frustrated with him, there's right there, you know, that you're somehow caught in the system because you're frustrated with him too, like she is. And so I think, I mean, we all get caught, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, I wonder if you could step out a little bit, have them talk directly to each other more, track the pattern as you're observing and as you're asking and facilitating those conversations, and then listen for power. Because a person who criticizes over and over and over again often experiences a lack of influence or power, and they keep repeating and repeating and repeating, or they'll go what way, you know, that kind of dynamic.
Wait, no, you're talking about the person that, no, he's not criticizing her at all.
But
He's criticizing himself. That's what you mean, though?
well, it's more the criticizing the other that they're not being heard. But I would just look for that nuanced power. As a female, she's making more money, but what the research shows is that when women make more money, it doesn't have the power reversal effect that you would expect it to have. In fact, more financially stable women still experience typically uh, being a little bit one down in a partnership. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but I think just looking at that whole dynamic more closely, he's not attuning to her needs. He's not attuning to what she's asking him to do. It could be that that's one of the ways he holds on to his power, or that he's just not attuned to her enough to be able to recognize this is my partner who's asking me something very important, and I'm dismissing it, and I'm doing it in a way that looks like I'm praising her and so on, but in the end he's still not attuning to her. So I just kind of would look at very
Well, I could, and that's the thing is, and this is why I was almost kind of hesitant to bring this one up, because there are so complexities. I mean, I could even tell you some of his barriers, the things that his vocalizations that are getting in the way. He's so in her, he's so caretaking her. We've been working on him doing less caretaking. Like just even him talking, he will start talking about her needs, like, well, I don't want to leave her out in the waiting room right now because, she's melting down and she's doing this and she's doing that. And because we met individually because he needed to unpack the recent gambling episode. When I go get her, she's just out there chill, so he's constantly worrying about her, but he also has this very strong message that I am here to take care of my wife. I am here to dote on my wife. But he has a very particular image of what doting on his wife looks like and how that means always being kind to her. But what he doesn't connect with is that his kindness is so enabling. But that's the thing is last night she finally went on a binge and it finally caught his attention, and he's actually now swung more to the middle and is able to and actually held her accountable. It held her more accountable than I've seen her do it. And but we worked around the negative self-talk, and that really seemed to kind of soften it up. Mm-hmm. But I hear what you're saying, though. It's bring more of the dialogue between them.
And try to get yourself out kind of, I think, a little bit, because I think you're seeing the situation a little more like she's seeing it. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But that's always a little bit of a flag for me when I think, okay, what am I missing? Or right. Starting to have that sort of sense of getting a little bit annoyed or having difficulty with one person. What am I missing in the system? And then I think, the thing about it, meeting her needs and being kind, is he really meeting her needs? I'm not sure of that, because when she says, I need this, that's not happening. But so. No, he's not. Yeah.
That's
what you're saying, but obviously I'm sure you're challenging that too, but.
Oh yeah.
That's the best I could come up with at this point, is to step back a little bit, try to take more of a meta view of the pattern that they have, and get out of sort of the middle of trying to negotiate with each one or change each one in the process and look more at their pattern. But I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and unmute everybody. And anybody else have input here? Or anything you disagree with, agree with? Think.
All good.
Pardon? Anybody? Okay, so no input at all?
Can you speak a little about some interventions to help him attune to her better?
Yeah, and that's one of the things, I think that must be Brandy. I can recognize your voice. So let me, let me do that. We're going to talk about that a little bit more next year too, but go ahead. I'm going to mute everybody and I'll talk about that. So one of the things we talk about, particularly here at Lewis and Clark, and with Carmen Knudsen Martin's work on socio-emotional relational therapy, is really looking at these nuances of power. And what you find is that when people have more power, and power can be a difficult thing to assess because it's not always very obvious, but the person who has sort of more power in a relationship often doesn't realize that they're not attuned to the person with less power. People with less power in general are more attuned to people with more power. So just think about, I don't know, going into work, and the person who is that hires you, that's your boss, the experience you have of attuning to that person when they come into work versus the experience you may have when somebody who you feel a peer or somebody who is working in the agency at a lower hierarchical level walks in, the way you don't have the same attunement necessarily to their emotions. So it's sort of an overarching kind of idea. It's not 100% always that way, but when you're looking at attunement, we're really looking at, can I really understand what this person needs? Can I imagine what this person is experiencing? And do I sort of naturally think about what their experience is in order to, you don't have to always meet a person's needs, but in order to be sort of aware of somebody that you care about. So when you look at couples, a lot of times one person is highly attuned. A lot of times that tends to be the person with less power. And in a patriarchal society, that often in heterosexual relationships, that often tends to be the female, but not always, who is more attuned to how the partner feels. So this also, that dynamic happens in same-sex relationships and polyamorous relationships, but basically you're looking at, is one person sort of really aware of their partner's needs and feelings and thoughts, and the other person sort of has to be reminded. So you end up with, and then they may still not respond. So you end up with sometimes situations where couples will come in and one person just seems off the chain. They're just repeating and yelling and upset, and you think, wow, that person has a lot of power, or that person is really difficult to work with, or whatever. And oftentimes that's a person who's not feeling heard or not feeling listened to. So it's more likely that the person who's more quiet or whatever may in fact have less attunement to their partner and may have a little more power. And so you just have to kind of watch that really closely. Now, when you have that situation, which is what you're asking about, Brandy, is that you would want, and we can talk about this more next year, but you want to be able to go in and you have to, first of all, you don't put the burden of exposing themselves and taking risk on the person who is already more attuned. So let's just be really stereotypical here, and let's take a heterosexual relationship in which a woman is more attuned than her male partner, because it's the easiest example to give. So over and over again in therapy, what do? We ask the person with less power, we ask the person who's more willing to share emotion, more willing to share complaints, and we say, well, could you turn to your partner and tell him, what you're experiencing? And so she says, okay, she turns to the partner and starts to talk about what they're experiencing. The partner is not attuned, that's the problem. So when they're not attuned to what their partner is typically saying, they're not going to be any more attuned to it in therapy. And so we put the burden of the attunement and the expression onto the person with less power. So in this situation, what we want to do instead is, as people are talking, we want to attune to the person. Of course, we're attuning to everybody, obviously, but we want to specifically attune to the person who lacks attunement. So we're able to turn to that, in this case, male partner, and say, it seems to me like, for example, it's really important to you that you have a marriage in which you feel connected and that it's a kind relationship or whatever. And then the person says, yes, that's very important to me. So you attune to that and you help them. You say, I get where you're coming from. And then you ask them really to attune to their partner. So then you might say something like, I wonder what it might be like. What do you think it might be like for your wife when she hears you say this or that? So now he's saying, well, I can begin to imagine what it might be like for a partner for whom I'm not attuned. And then you might say, you know, can you ask her what that's like for her? And this time when you ask her, I want you to really just listen and try to kind of get yourself, you know, put yourself in her shoes. And so you kind of move slowly like that, but you move through the person and sort of guide them and teach them how to attune to the partner in vivo in the session. And it's not a one-time thing. It happens over and over and over again. But that typically will give the person with less power more hope. And it gives them more hope because you've acknowledged and recognized the power dynamic. If you don't do that, if you go in and you fail to recognize that dynamic, then the expectancy for change is going to be lower. So you're engaging both people. You think, oh, well, I should engage the person with more power because they have more power to bring somebody in, or I should engage with the person with less power because that empowers them. And you want to think about all those things, but with this particular kind of move, you're trying to get attuned to the person, each person, but attuned to the person who's struggling with how to attune to others, and then sort of walk them through how to do that. And there's more specific techniques involved with that we can certainly do a whole session on next year if you're interested. I'm going to unmute you now, Brandy. Hold on. Oops, why aren't you unmuting? Oh, I'm having so much trouble with this mute. Okay, so anybody have comments or thoughts about that? Anybody? Brandy, what do you think?
And I have done that with couples when I ask the stereotypical male partner to turn to the female partner and ask her for those experiences. Sometimes that starts an argument about whether or not that's true, or like he would negate her, and then it kind of falls into that old pattern of the reality of.
Okay, I'm going to mute you again. Hold on. Okay, so you're talking about how you might say to the person who you want to listen, could you ask your partner about whatever? And if you do it without attuning and carefully helping him, or in this case him, know how to think about putting themselves in the other person's shoes, kind of getting at that sort of a little bit more significant sort of awareness or emotional state that allows them to do that, then it's really no different from you asking. Because if they're saying, well, I want to know, how do you feel about that? And then the partner says, well, this. And then they go back and say, well, that's not what I think, and on it goes. So I think it's more about reaching this sort of the way it looks to me is that usually the therapist is slowing way down. They're getting at a deeper level of expectation or meaning by saying, you know, instead of, I want you to ask your partner this, you would say, you know, it seems to me that this is a really important issue for you. Is that, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what's that like for you? And, you know, I see that you this and that. So the therapist is really getting at that level so the more less attuned partner really feels understood deeply. And then you're going at the, you know, can you imagine, and what might that be like for your partner at that lower, slower level? And then if they can't do that, then you don't go any further then. You keep working on it until they can imagine what it's like for their partner that they haven't been able to attune to, and you think they're ready to attune. Because if they're not ready and you just repeat the same problem that happens at home, then you not only do you not make change, but you could risk losing some hope in the therapy process because the same thing happened that happens at home. I'm going to unmute you. Any thoughts about that? Anybody? Is this a topic we might want to go more into in more detail and with some video and so on next year?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, so let's put this on our agenda for next year where we can really do a whole lesson on it, and I can send you a handout and all that stuff, because it is more complex, and I can hear that it's complex enough that it's hard for people just to sort of quickly pick up on it. Okay? Okay, now I'm not getting a lot of other feedback, so I think we'll go to the questions that we start out with around abstinence versus, sorry, abstinence versus harm reduction. All right, so I'm hoping people will start participating a little bit more, because this call really is about talking with each other. Sorry, I'm going to have to mute everybody again. Hearing loud background. Somebody building a house or anything in the background? Really loud. Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody again. Oh. And then we're going to go back to this topic. So these are some of the questions I was hoping we could talk about if we can hear each other. And they're really about, what have we experienced when working with families in which harm reduction is the goal? And some of the questions for me are things like, families typically are trying to do harm reduction in that they're trying to reduce the consequences, which we've called enabling and things like that for years. But so I think the idea that they want to reduce the harm of gambling is not new. But the idea here is to be clear about, this is harm reduction in that you would gamble less or have greater limits for gambling or things like that. And I think I would want to think about, when is harm reduction really an attempt to maintain a shared dream world or a relational pattern that supports gambling? For example, we have a number of families at the clinic or couples at the clinic where, they'll be going along and doing pretty well, and then they'll both say, well, we decided to go out to eat, and so we just decided, or she asked me for $10, and it's only $10, so I said okay, and they have this sort of fun pattern of being able to gamble and be out from time to time, and the partner shares the dream world in that the partner says, well, actually she won, so we got to dinner for free. So it's this idea of, well, gamble if you're going to win, and it's more like just go ahead and win and then bring the money back, and stop while you're ahead. And to me, that's in part maintaining this shared dream world about the idea that gambling could solve financial problems or be a financial positive in your life. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, I'm going to do all these at once because we can't hear each other very well, so I'll just do them all at once and then I'll open it up. The other thing I was wondering or thinking about is, when is harm reduction really negotiated as a mandate, not by the court, but by the family? So this whole idea of, sort of readiness for change and motivational interviewing and all that, you think about, a lot of times family members will start with this kind of frame of not realizing how difficult it is to reduce gambling, and may start with, I just want you to cut down, or I just want you to stop when you're ahead, or it's fine, I want to keep going and gambling, I want to go to the casino, but I only want you to go with me. And so sometimes it's sort of like I think we have to be careful that it's not sort of negotiated as something the family's saying, yes, we'll be willing to have the gambling continue, but only if it's reduced to a certain point. And I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I just want to think about, how it's being negotiated. And then also I was thinking about the anxiety that leaves, no matter what, when people have somebody who's gambling and they're in treatment, their anxiety is going to be fairly high about the person either relapsing or not. So when you know that your partner or your family member or your parent has a problem gambling, you certainly can be triggered through a harm reduction model when you see them gambling a little bit and wondering, are they going to be able to stop, versus when you think, okay, that's gambling completely out. So how we deal with those anxieties and so on. Let's see, that's an awful lot. Let's stop right there so I'm not just talking forever and hear kind of what people think so far. Okay, everybody can talk now. So, any thoughts? Go to the first one. What are your experiences around harm reduction with families? Anybody willing to share that a little bit here?
I would say something. So I guess I haven't really had a lot of situations come up where that is something that's on the table. I guess my experience is that usually it doesn't really end up working in the long term. That in the rare occasions that it has come up, because it seems to be discomfort in the family members, like everyone, it just kind of everyone's making space for it, but then it just keeps getting bigger. That it seems to, the attempts to make it harm reduction, you aim for a 2 and it ends up being a 5, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So I haven't really seen it as a long-term strategy yet.
So maybe you would resonate more with this next statement on the slide, which is how might harm reduction be an experiment along the way that helps people determine that they can no longer gamble?
Yeah, that fits very much that it ends up being the kind of thing. I mean, that where it's people aren't ready to quit, but they're distressed enough they're ready to cut back, and that sometimes we have to do the thing that we think is the solution and find out it doesn't work before we're ready to be open to another solution. So that's been my experience on how harm reduction works. And the rare situation where I see it kind of work is where someone has such a restricted low income that, they may only have $5 extra a week, but even then it's not really working because they keep spending their laundry money and then they can't wash their clothes. So I haven't personally seen it be long-term. Yes, it's more of a stepping stool towards a bigger decision.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm sure everybody could talk here. Anybody else have a comment? All right. Okay, so that's our experience at the clinic as well, that it's typically sort of, sure, let's go ahead and try that and see how that goes. And then that oftentimes leads people to be able to say, well, it's just not worth it, or it gets out of hand too often, and those kinds of things. Harm reduction, so I imagine that anytime that you have any reduction in the cost, the financial cost and burden and the relational burden on the family through reducing the gambling is possibly helpful in some way. So we have had people too who have reduced their gambling, and I think somewhat like you were saying, Lisa, it seems to work for a while. It doesn't often work in the long run, but it can, but it seems to in the shorter run. I think that this idea, like we're talking here about this sort of, and then maybe applies to the case you brought up earlier, this sort of shared dream world. We've been tuning in a lot more to that, where the schemas, if you want to look at cognitive behavioral therapy or family therapy, and think about the schemas around money and gambling and how much of those schemas are shared across family members. The dream world isn't necessarily an individual issue only. It's oftentimes a shared family or a couple kind of view about the gambling in the world. So that might also come in here. The other questions I had were like, who draws the line? And that's kind of what you were talking about earlier too, where how does the dynamic work around drawing the line with harm reduction? And who's responsible for that, and and accountable for that line. And then the other thing we found a lot is with some of the harm reduction ideas, and this is true for abstinence as well, but shopping will replace gambling, or some other kind of activity will replace the gambling. So I want us to try to share some here. Can anybody else share anything?
I have an interesting case, a couple that decided the gambler is only going to gamble with the free money, the coupons he gets from the casino, and no longer with the family money. And now they are down to about $5 a month, and went to Reno over the weekend and did not gamble at all. And that was kind of a harm reduction, because it was like a weaning down process almost.
That's a good example of possibly of a harm reduction framework that works.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you say anything about how you helped that happen, or what kind of interventions you used to?
There were some other issues. And the gambler also is a hoarder, and we started small with packing stuff up that hasn't been used in more than a year. Then we went down to 6 months. And so it was almost like incorporating gambling in this, getting rid of these things that were not really needed for its well-being. This is a very interesting case.
That is very interesting. So how was the decision made within the family that there would be this only gambling with the casino certificates? How did the family or couple, if there was a couple,
Yes, couple.
negotiate that? How did they negotiate that?
I don't know. It just came up in a one-on-one session with them, and the partner actually brought it up and said, "How about, instead of basing all our money, let's do this." And so we made a treatment plan around that, and it really worked out great, amazingly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and who's monitoring that?
We talk about it for a few minutes in every one-on-one, and we have talked about harm reduction in group, and the partner is actually the one monitoring it. They do everything together. They're retired, so they have all time in the world to, they're a very close couple. He does not enable, he's just really, really supportive and had great ideas.
Okay, so I love having a positive example of harm reduction. And if there was no gambling certificates, would the person simply not gamble that month?
I don't think he's gonna gamble with his own money anymore. He has created some of the things that he really likes, that they really like to do, which is cooking and baking, and actually presenting that in fairs, and just a lot of other activities, and that they're involved with now, so that gambling isn't even an issue anymore.
Wow, that sounds like a real success.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to hear that. Anybody else have any examples of harm reduction? So I think this example you just gave is such a great one, because there's a lot of major shifts that sound like have happened.
Yes.
Really what we would call second order change in the way in which the couple works together, the way in which they have replaced activities, they have come to an understanding with each other and are able to support this initiative together, and a number of other things and the hoarding has decreased, which tells me there must be some other major changes going on. So you're at a point where the change has significant enough that it's able to maintain the harm reduction.
It's been a very interesting case to work with and to follow the progress. I still see the people, so they're still in treatment.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Great. Okay, anybody else have any comments about this? If not, we're going to move on. Or any thoughts about either harm reduction or anything else we've been talking about, or anything else you want to bring up? This is the quietest group. Get really hard on me, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead then with, and even if we end a little bit early, I'm going to go ahead and do this rather than, so the things we're talking about, the topics for next year, we'll have 4 formal lesson calls where I do most of the talking, and then we'll continue to have these as long as they are helpful, where we have these in more informal advanced calls. And so the 4 topics that we've looked at so far are family assessment, power in couples, which is what you brought up today, Brandy, and we're talking about going a little further on as far as helping people become attuned to each other. The 3rd topic that we have talked about is, and this is one I think you brought up, Julio, which is therapists and counselors as part of the system, particularly when one member of the system isn't present, how you can sometimes become part of the system that holds that sort of place. And then the other one I thought maybe we might bring up is sort of the impact on family of gambling and shared dream world. That's been a topic I've been somewhat interested in lately. But we're wide open for other topics. If there's other topics that you want me to consider for next year, anybody? Want to go back to any of the things that we talked about last year that you might have missed? Or any input from the group at all? Greta, do you have any questions of the group?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, it sounds like it may have just been a really busy day for people, and they're not as present or prepared to really dive in as some, yes, but I mean, in general, we haven't had a lot of discussion today. So let's go ahead and assume everybody good with ending early then? Any input from anybody about anything?
Thank you, Teresa.
Okay, we're going to end early, right?
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I think I've heard from a few people that sounds okay. And so we have the next dates already scheduled, and Greta will get those dates out to you, and we'll talk to you in January.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you. Talk
Thank
to
you very much.
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.